Um, All power to the people. Here's the panel of the Panther 48. We bring it to you today. Dialogue and a discussion on the dehumanizing and its effects on our psychological growth and on the movement. We have the panel of the illustrious Panther 48, Brother Robert Ward Williams. We have the Minister of Information Emeritus, Brother E. And we have myself, Brother Syke. And to open this discussion and to explain the details of this dynamic and an extremely long title, I'm gonna pass the mic over to Brother War.
All right. First thing I like to get into is the idea of what it means to dehumanize. So when you look at the concept of dehumanizing, realize that basically what we're talking about is being able to project an image of disassociating the persons or the people participating in a forward direction or a progression or a change in a state of condition from the norm. And in doing so, you can just take this image that's from behind me here, this image of the panther. In order to dehumanize people or the people that represent that image, what they would do is try to associate it with a condition of fear, associated with a condition of terror. And in doing so, at that point, it creates a separation from the people that represent that from the general society. And in doing so, what you do is you basically cause an isolation. By causing that isolation, the psychological damage that it does for those people that represent it puts us in at odds against the people that we are actually serving. So when you dehumanize the concept or a group of people, basically it's creating a opening to deal with character assassination and physical assassination, and obviously the psychological warfare that goes into that and the weaponization that goes into that has to do with how you end up spending more time trying to undo the perception that goes along with serving the people, mind you, then you are able to even actually serve the people. And as a result of that, it also plays into the egotism that creates various forms and representations that people will step out in terms of serving the people. So the dehumanization is the first step, and the way and when it's applied properly in terms of a warfare aspect, then the people actually start doing it to themselves as well. And so I think that it's real important that we are able to pick up on the methodologies that go into dehumanizing a people, because it affects it not just externally, but internally as well. Anytime psychological warfare is applied properly, it has that twofold way of going about things, to where it also affects the external people in their reality, in touch with reality, as it applies to the person that's being targeted, as well as the person that's being targeted comes off as if they need to reevaluate their position and what they represent in the first place. So then they end up second guessing themselves, their approach, and their association with the rest of the world. So that's my intro to that.
What happens now, Tyson? You coming in?
Yes.
Why do we always do that? When you over your mouth, that's you coming in. You supposed to just.
My bad. Okay.
I know.
So
He's sleepy over there.
So I kind of took it in a broader sense, kind of along the lines of what we talked about on the recent podcast. What separates us from non-humans in the world is our ability to will, our willpower, our ability to create our reality based on, accomplishing what we will. And when you dehumanize somebody, you effectively, or dehumanize an entire group of people, you've effectively taken away their ability, their power to will and to create that reality and to make changes. So on a broader scale, outside of an organizational level, but the dehumanizing of an entire group of people, as those people accept that dehumanization, we lose our ability to exercise our will, which makes the perfect slave. We've been dehumanized since, the day they brought us here, chattel slavery. And we've never, in the eyes of the broader community, society, never escaped that. Even years ago, there was a magazine cover with LeBron. I think it was LeBron James. Yeah, it was LeBron James. Um, Basically in beast mode, I guess you might call it, with a basketball. He was dribbling a basketball in one hand, and the other hand was wrapped around the waist of this white girl. And had reflections back to the whole King Kong movie, the whole King Kong era, and they do that uh, uh, um, repeatedly. Every uh, or a number of stereotypes places in a less than human, a subhuman position um, uh, to pursue that dehumanizing effect. So yeah, whenever you have a group of people and you relegate them to subservience and a less than human, and again, human being the will and the ability and the power to create and to do, you take that away, particularly when the group of people that is being dehumanized, when that group accepts that and takes that on, it completely removes any ability for them to move, to do, which I think is like one of the major effects of what we're dealing with. The masses of the people believe we do not have the power to do anything. So whenever anything comes up, what do? They run to the very people that are oppressing them. The very people that are dehumanizing them can tell them, yeah, we think you're less than, we don't, da 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 da. Something happens, and what do? We go run to them. We have a problem between two black men, we go run into them. Black man, black woman got a problem, we run to them. Everything that goes on, we need food, we need light, anything, we run to somebody else because we've accepted this idea, generally speaking, of our own dehumanization. And so we no longer have the capacity mentally to will ourselves a new reality, which is the actual factual of what sets us apart from the beast world, from the animal kingdom. Dogs, cats, rats, none of these animals have the capacity, the divinity, in fact, to to create their reality. They do as they're told, or they react and instinctually, emotionally, or whatever to whatever their stimuli or whatever stimulus is around them. But as human beings, endowed with that divine ability to will and create a reality, is what separates us from them. And again, like I said, taking that power away by dehumanizing and relegating us to apes and to everything else that they've attempted to portray us as, removes that capability, which takes the support from under the Panther Party, from the nation, from any other group, because you have masses of the people that you're now having to try to convince that you are human. And I think that's the ultimate the ultimate card for dehumanizing.
And just to add to that, um, you said that they have been dehumanizing us since they first brought us here, and that's so true because of the fact of the matter is you cannot make a person willingly a slave without the dehumanization process first. There is no way possible that a person would just accept slavery. Even think about the ideal of what a person accepts when they go to prison. Nobody wants to be in prison, but you have to convince them that they're supposed to be in prison and that they can do nothing about their prison situation in order to just idly sit back and stay in prison. Because on average basic unit in Texas might have 1,500 men on it, and you have 30 officers controlling 1,500 men. Now you don't have to be a mathematician to see that there is no way possible 30 men can control 1,500, even if the 1,500 was unarmed and all the 30 was armed. There doesn't take an extraordinary level of math, but what's required there is the psychological effects of dehumanization as we're talking about now. In the Art of War, Sun Tzu said, he said that let me remember the quote. He said that there is no great skill in being able to identify the sun. There's no mastery of hearing in order to be able to identify the thunderclap. Anybody can do that. He said, just like you're not considered a great warrior just because you can fight 100 times and win 100 times. He said, it's considered the acme of skill when you can win all without fighting. And the concept that he was dealing with when he said this was being able to defeat an enemy through strategy, being able to defeat him even in his mother's womb. And that's what took place with black people in America and any oppressed people anywhere in the society. And it's getting close to a presidential election. And this has been on my mind because I remember when I had to explain this to a lot of young brothers because they did not understand the concept or the ideal of how somebody could win a popular vote but not win an electoral vote. They didn't understand that. They were like, what is that? I don't understand that. They stole the election. Oh, look at them. They did it. And I said, they didn't steal the election. All they did was the way the country has been set up to run. Again, we go back to what I said about prison, 1,500 men being controlled by 30. And you could control the people with force. You can, but when you use force against a person, you actually force them to start defending themselves. Because sooner or later, people will say, I'm tired of being hit, beat on. I'm tired of being oppressed. You look at the protests that's going on in the streets now. People can see force. People can see you kneeling on their neck. People can see you shooting people in the back. So people start resisting that. So the best way of control or dealing with a person is manipulation, that careful manipulation of a person. And that's what goes on in the electoral process. The great founders of this country, when they created this aspect of this society, they wanted people to believe that they had a voice and that they had control over who their leadership was. But at the same time, they did not believe that that type of power could be placed in the hands of the irrational mob. They didn't believe that. So they created the electoral process based on the popular vote. Okay, the irrational mob, cast your vote for who you want to be the president. But at the same time, they created an electoral college, a group of people who actually elect the president who are not elected by the irrational mob. So the people think that they're voting in the president, and it's truly the electoral college that's voting in the president. And I bring up this example in this process because we're dealing again with psychological warfare. As long as I convince you that you don't have, as long as I can convince you that you have some power, even though you don't have power, you won't resist and fight for power.
Now, let me add real quick to something you're saying on that, because I want to clarify something. One of the aspects that goes into dehumanizing also is taking place when you deal with the advancement or the generalized thought of a society. What makes us human, like he was talking about, and separates us is our ability to manipulate the environment, to control the environment. So even when we call ourselves trying to be in tune with nature, that in itself can also create the projection of dehumanization. And so from that standpoint, it gives the few the opportunity or the position of being able to be overpowering nature. And by them overpowering nature and being out of that balance of nature, but yet the perception is that they are dominating or controlling nature, whereas another group of people or another society would be trying to work and be one within nature. Then they can be looked upon or viewed as being uncivilized, so to speak. So that uncivilization or that need to not necessarily appear as though you are mastering or controlling your environment is also a form of dehumanization. And as a result of some of that, keep in mind also what happens in regards, like what Psych is saying about people are coming out protesting and recognizing and seeing the issues. When you are dehumanized, And the process in which you're dehumanized have not been identified. That's no different than not knowing who your enemy is. So even though people are going out, people are pissed, people are saying enough is enough, if you're not able to identify the way in which you're being attacked, then you cannot target your enemy. You cannot form a proper defense. And even going back into the idea, the process of the concept of the political process, it applies right across the board. They have you looking in one direction while they attack you in a different one. And so physically, mentally, and spiritually, we have yet to truly identify the source of the attack that's coming at us collectively. And when we can't identify the source of the attack, and where you couple that with the idea in the way in which we've been dehumanized, when we do stand up and recognize it, that again creates an isolation that causes the ones that do see the out of tune with nature as an actual being barbaric versus being in tune with nature as being barbaric, which is, you know, the whole technology aspect. When we recognize that, then that isolation causes further separation from us and the people that have been psychologically destroyed as a result of the domestication that creates the dehumanizing factor. So to those that are dehumanized, we are, you know, to those that are dehumanized and the ones that see through that dehumanization, there is more and more of a separation that goes between us and them. And we end up looking like we the ones that are crazy for recognizing where the attack is coming from. We look like we crazy for recognizing that the conditions that we're dealing with have caused us to be separated from our will, like Brother E was saying. And so it's a process even of bringing the collective that's been dehumanizing back around to having a conscious of that you know, a semblance of having character and conscience and power again. So until we are able to create that and draw that connection back together, the masses of people don't know that they're being attacked, and they don't know how they're being attacked. They just know it hurts. They just know something hurts. And from that standpoint, the more they stand up, the more they try to search and look for the true nature of the attack and how it's coming at them, the more they're viewed as being a threat, and the you know, the turnkey and the tourniquet is twisted to try to maintain that separation between them and us.
No doubt. And that also, you know, you like with the electoral college and all, even beyond that, there's another step in the process where the Senate actually has to vote to legitimize the election results. So even once both of those have been counted and tallied up, and you know the vote says whoever won, Trump wins, yay. Um, it's still not the actual vote that does it, because Senate has to turn around and, I believe it's the Senate, has to turn around and vote on whether or not those election results are legitimate or not. So just another one of those legalese processes that they hide back in the dark corners. And I would agree the best way to oppress the people is to get them to ask for that oppression, and that's what we continually do, by running to the ones who are dehumanizing us and putting us in this position of powerlessness, running to what we see as power, as opposed to running to ourselves and seeing ourselves as power. And that all comes from that underpinning of a cultural identity and our identity with one another. If your hand is numb, or like Malcolm used to talk about, they shoot you full of stuff called Novocaine. So that even though you're getting, you know, yanked on and whatnot, you don't feel it. You don't realize it's you that's being poked and prodded on physically. So you just go along with it, and you take it. And that we've been numbed to our humanity, and we don't identify each other. You know, somebody in Compton getting messed around and beat down and murdered by the cops. Somebody in New York, in Brooklyn or whatever, um, if they're not aware to whatever reality, to the reality to whatever degree that, yeah, that's me in Compton that's getting shot by the police. We don't identify like that anymore because we've had that, our humanness, our identity stripped away from us. And it just makes it so much easier for the oppressors to do what it is they got to do. Because, like I said, at that point, we turn around and we used to, even in slave times, we depended on one another because we identified with one another and our humanity and leaned on one another. And then it got to a point where we were taught to lean on the oppressor and look to the oppressor to resolve our issues. And that, again, is all a part and a result of our humanity being destroyed, our identity being destroyed. Every group of people in this world identifies their humanity through those that they come up around. Asian folks identify themselves and know they're human in whatever Asian country they're in because they're identifying with folks that are around them. We identify with folks that are around us who we've been taught are animals, so we must be animals too. We're not human. And so we go along with that and we build on that and we teach our children to basically see one another as animals. And that's ultimately how we start behaving, start interacting, and because we have come to believe that, yeah, we're not human. And, all of that's in the schools and entertainment and everything else that goes on. We glorify and get hyped and come up with cute little nicknames to justify and to make it feel easier to swallow. And, terms like nigger that used to be something that we took offense to. It's funny to me how we talk about taking the power away from the word by using it. It's nonsense. We're the least powerful group of people in this country. We don't have the power to redefine a word whose very existence came into being to remove our humanity. We don't have the power to do that because we can't even decide whether we're African American or African or black. We can't define those simple terms. So to turn around and say, yeah, we're going to take the power from this word that somebody else created and gave us, you have to have some type of cultural unity for that. Gay folks could do that. They took the word queer used to be a derogatory term. They took that and that's a part of their LBTB, whatever it is, and owned it, and now they run with it. But they have a sense in that community, they have a sense of unity. They identify around whatever, for better or worse, they identify with one another around that and have a sense of community and coming togetherness that we don't have. So doing things like that is just utter nonsense. But it's a part of the dehumanizing process. We don't understand power. We don't understand our power. We damn sure don't understand how to use it.
I want to ask a couple of questions, and these questions are mostly for the listening audience because sometimes when we have these conversations, we tend to talk from the point of view of somebody that's been in the struggle 20 years instead of from the point of view of somebody who's just waking up to understand these ideas. And that's why I want to ask these questions. One, we're using the term dehumanizing. So and so that means to take away your humanity, and you were just using the term human. And there are people that are listening to this that will say, what are they talking about? I haven't been, my humanity has not been taken from me. I got two legs. I can walk. I can talk English. What is he saying? What they mean? I got a job. I got a wife. I ain't less than a human. I'm not an animal. What is they saying when they say human? So that's one question I want to ask. Keep that in mind. What is a human? Then once you identify that, either one of you brothers, identify the step by step process of taking that away from someone. Because I'm pretty sure there are people that are watching this that's in complete disagreement of this whole dehumanizing concept.
Where you want to go?
I'll let you start off with the human and and then we'll jump in.
For the African, a human is an African because we were the first, therefore we are the definition of what a human is. Before we were divided up and somebody else decided, okay, there are going to be Africans and Europeans and Asian Caucasian, Mongoloid, and all of that stuff, we were the definition of being human. And to the degree that we realize our Africanness and what it is we were before we were told we were something else, when we were in existence, the only time that we've ever been free is before dealing with these Europeans. So until we are able to identify, and to whatever degree we choose to identify with that reality, defines our humanness. For a European, human is being separated again because that's their cultural identity. You know, we can go into the DNA and how it's defined, Homo sapiens sapien, and all of those types of things, and that's good for a science class. But in terms of society and cultural realities, our humanness as Africans is defined by a certain dynamic. European humanness is defined by an opposite dynamic, that dynamic being an individual existence. Our natural existence, our natural identity in our humanness, in our reality, naturally is through one another. We are a collective people. We always have been. It is at the essence of who and what we are. And every day we do these mental gymnastics to attempt to define our reality. Otherwise, just causes further angst and further confusion as to who and what we are. That's why so many of these things, these processes and solutions and all of these things don't work for us. Capitalism does not work for us. It never has, it never will, because it goes against our humanness. Our humanness is embedded in other human beings. And it's like the whole idea of, what would Jesus do? Jesus couldn't, from the stories I'm told, from what I've read, Jesus couldn't be a capitalist because Jesus was down for loving and uplifting his brother. That's not what capitalism is. Capitalism is a European concept that says, I got to get mine even at the expense of you. If I got to step on your head to get to where I'm going, so be it. It's all about me and mine. That's an individualistic European concept. We are a communal people. All of our politics, economics, our divinity, our spiritual systems are all defined in terms of a communal existence. So until we tap into that communal reality that is at the essence of who and what we are, we're not going to realize our humanity. And again, I'm talking in terms of social concepts, not the DNA, not the Homo sapiens sapien and Homo erectus and all of those things. In terms of the society in which we live, we have been given a certain concept and precepts and these definitions of race that are all foreign to us. So our humanity, being a human being for different groups of people, is going to mean slightly different things. And for the African, which is where we are, that definition of humanity is going to rest primarily in how it is we interconnect and interact with others that we identify as being a part of our same tribe, so to speak. And I guess we'll wait till after to go to the process step by step thing. I don't know if War, you want to jump in here, or if we're going to go right into the process part.
Well, let's go into the process, but let me start off the process by basically saying, to me, one of the greatest aspects in terms of weaponizing and drawing that position is the difference, and I would say this, between us recognizing separation versus division, because oftentimes the two are interchanged and they can't be. Those two definitely words cannot be interchanged, but oftentimes they are. Separation is a natural occurrence in nature, period. Nothing is wrong with separation. Separation does not extract you from having a power base, but division does. And from that end, the difference between division and separation is, division is when you take apart or remove two things from that are normally operating together within a certain society. Whereas separation is just a natural occurrence between the type of climate, the type of terrain, in the environment that naturally creates a need to operate one way versus another way. Whereas division is, you can have a group of people all within the same type of boundaries, and then you find a way to split them. And then the vision always comes from a weaponization standpoint, always comes right along with conquering. So from that standpoint, you would take one and make it two, and then you will find ways to be able to channel up or group up with one against the other, and then have them basically isolate and destroy themselves. See, separation doesn't mean isolation, that it leads to isolation, but division leads to isolation. And isolation is what is dangerous from that standpoint when it comes to the process and the ultimate goal when you dehumanize a people, and that has to do with the destruction of them. From that standpoint, when you create that isolation, again, talking about division, you're talking about, like how he would say, we're all Africans, and next thing you know, they create that division and then the isolation between one African against another African. And at that point, we infight with one another, and we strip each other of our power base. And then they jump in and assist and aid in taking sides, so to speak, whether it be direct or indirect, and create that intersection to be able to cause both parts to fold. So when you think about that, is basically just all about warfare and the perception that is drawn in order to create a soft target that can be applied across the board and step back and cause that isolation to work from within and destroy itself. All along, they actually created the condition to do so. And because of the isolation, that population does not identify that the enemy actually attacked from outside by causing the internal to what? Create that isolation or to create that division.
Let me add before we go to the process. I want to add to that definition of human. I want to add to that a little bit, and maybe even open a can of worms with E, because I know this is a very sensitive subject with E, the African thing. So I might open a can of worms with this. This might be a good one. But let me add to the definition of human, because I like etymology. I like the history and the origin of a word when we're dealing with human. The word human literally comes from two words, hue and man. Humus. The word humus means soil. So human, when they first utilized this term, meant the man from the soil. Dr. Khalid used to like to say that hue also meant color. So it meant the man of color. So human in any interchangeable way could mean the man of color, the man from the soil. So the true human would be the original man that came from the soil. And as Brother E just so eloquently put it a few minutes ago, that the original man came out of the place that we identify right now as Africa. The oldest evidence that we have of a human, of people being on the planet, came out of Africa, and came from that soil. So the true human would be the original man. And the word origin, original, literally means origin of all. That's what the word is. The word is origin and all put together. So the original man will be the origin of all. So the human will be that original man that came from the soils of the place that we call Africa now. And all other strings of so-called humans will be mankind, or the kind of man that came from the human. So there would actually be only one true human on the planet, and everything else would be the mankind or the kinds of man that came from the original man in some way, form, or fashion. Now, if we identify that and understand that, this goes to let E pull his sword out a little bit when I say this. Then the original man or the human would not be the African. That wouldn't be his name. Because the only time that being called African became necessary is when there was other people on the planet to differentiate yourself from. When there was nobody else, at one time, the entire world was black. When there was no one else to differentiate yourself from, there was nothing that we had to be called, because there was nothing that we was called from, if that makes any sense. If there's any understanding in that when I say that. And so the true, like I just said, the true human will be the original man. Now we identify certain things or certain qualities that go along with being human. Because you can have these two legs, these two arms, that head, you could talk and still not be considered a human, because you're not exercising human qualities. You're not operating under according to human standards. It's like Brother War walk into a room and they say, Brother War is a millionaire. And I say, yes, he is he. There are certain standards that go along with us being able to call Brother War a millionaire. And the basic standard of Brother War being considered a millionaire is that Brother War has to have a net worth of $1 million. Not necessarily $1 million cash, but he has to have a net worth. Everything that Brother War owns and controls have to add up to a million. If he does not have that, then we cannot call Brother War a millionaire. And that's what I mean when I say human. If a person does not have certain standards that qualify with being called considered a human, then we cannot call that person a human. We say that that person is operating at the level of animals, that that person is thinking at the level of an animal. And I just wanted to add that and give Brother E a chance. I thought Brother E might pull that sword out when I hit that African thing, because to me, us identifying ourselves as African now is important because it identifies a cultural land base. It identifies something that we come from. Like if we deal with any other people on the planet, if I say Bruce Lee or Ching Chung Lee, if I say that, automatically a language comes to mind, a food comes to mind, a land base comes to mind, an entire culture comes to mind. You know, if I say Michael Corleone, if I say that, a land base comes to mind, a language comes to mind, a food comes to mind. You know, if I say Carlos Herrera, the same thing happens. A land base comes to mind, and in this sense, it's the wrong land base, and it may be the wrong language, and it might even be the wrong food, because Carlos Herrera suffered from the same thing that we suffer from. Carlos Herrera has his slave master's name. He has his slave master's language, and he has his slave master's religion. Most of the time when you meet Latin people, they're gonna be Catholics. So they'll completely embody the slave master's culture, but you get the point. So now that's why being African or identifying with being African becomes important. But originally, was being identified with African, was that so important when there was nothing else to compare ourselves to? We were simply, as Dr. Khalid used to love to say, he said that 11.7 million square miles of Africa was our throne, but 196,940,000 square miles of the planet Earth was our home, and 11.7 million square miles of Africa is the throne that we ruled our home from.